Hey guys, and welcome back. This week I wanted to do another Help Me Fill My Sketchbook series that I started in January, and it is most of the way through April now. And to be honest, I haven't been in a super fantastic mood, so I decided that I should do something that I'm really familiar with. I feel like sometimes sketching things that I just really like sketching over and over helps to make me feel better and also helps build or rebuild confidence in my art. It's kind of nice and cozy and something that I'm used to and know for the most part I like creating. What subject would that be for me? Well, if you're new around here, you might not realize, but I have a thing for plants. These are some of my little fake plants here on my desk for shooting photography and things like that because they're really easy to style. You can see here I have quite an arrangement of succulents and other plants that I am a plant mom to right now, and these just fill me with inspiration, and I figured what I would do is sort of take you through sketching out some plants, maybe do some studies and just show you a little bit of an insight into the types of plants that I like drawing and that often pop up in my artwork. And I figured I would do, again, sort of a real-time kind of thing, sped up in places. Here's our doggos from last time, and we're just gonna flip to the next page. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sort of sketch things out, just kind of hang out with you guys and show you what I'm up to today. So first and foremost, I wanted to discuss a little bit about a project that I've been working on all of April, where I have been drawing and painting these little artist trading cards or ACEOs. This challenge was started by Claire of Black Summer Coloring. I'll have her channel linked down below, but I realized that a lot of these pieces have plants that I end up drawing a lot of the time, and we could kind of start here and I can sort of discuss some of these plants that I draw and maybe discuss a little bit about why I find drawing plants so soothing. So a lot of the time I like drawing a subject and I'll kind of have plants or succulents sort of jutting out from behind. Sometimes they're attached to the animal kind of like this because I like to do a little bit of a crossover, and you'll see a lot of pieces that are kind of like this. They'll have the background that's sort of almost a solid succulent. I like to add vines into a lot of my pieces. I mean, I enjoy green. Green is my favorite color. And aside from the ocean, just being out in nature and being out in greenery, especially after a fresh rain here in California, it just is so life-giving, I guess. And I think that that's a kind of direct fuel to my creative self. I'm gonna go ahead and figure out what color I want to sketch with. I end up sketching with green, this purple color. This is my favorite pencil for sketching. It's a Prismacolor Color Race and it's indigo blue. So I like to draw with this one, but I've been interested in getting some erasable pencil lead, and specifically the brand Pilot, the color Eno, that I've heard really good things about, and got just the lead because it seemed like getting the pencils, you end up having to get like the entire range to make it worth it and to kind of try different colors. And I know I really enjoy drawing with these colors here, so I got just some of, they're kind of like samples because they're only like 2 of each color in here, actually through Wish. And I ended up just adding them to this Daiso pencil that I have. And so I figured let's sketch out with this new lead a little bit. And I can tell you a little bit more about the plants that I'm drawing. Let me get you a little closer and let's just go ahead and bring some of this greenery in because I like having it on the screen. I love these little fake plants that I have. So honestly, when I draw plants, I'm pretty much just looking at a pattern. Like, so right now I'm gonna start off drawing some plants that I just sort of have in my visual library. And these are sort of simplified kind of look like plants, especially when I add the color, but really could be lots of things. They're essentially just a bunch of teardrops that I end up doing in a pattern, and I think they look like little leaves, and sometimes they kind of look like succulents, and so I like using these ones as a really quick kind of catch-all for plants when I'm drawing them. I think a lot of the plants I do end up being sort of my take on what the realistic plants look like. I do like drawing and painting realistic plants, but I find that I wanted to sort of incorporate them into more of a loose and I guess whimsical style, just something that I could jot down and feel like it's almost like a doodle. And the way I sort of incorporated these into my visual library was by just sort of studying plants here and there. I do have quite a collection of succulents, as you guys have seen, and I did studies, but then I realized that in a lot of nature, you end up having the same shape in sort of a pattern repeated over and over. And that's something that I sort of find comfort in with drawing nature and just being in nature, is there's this sort of balance between chaos and pattern, or chaos and predictability. And let me try to explain that. I feel like you see a lot of the same patterns a lot and the same shape over and over, but there's this sense of chaos that it doesn't need to be this perfect pattern. It's sort of this imperfect pattern of these shapes. And so I feel like it's really freeing drawing nature, especially when I have kind of my own loose style with it, because I feel like you can't really go wrong. It ends up shaving off a lot of time for me because I end up being able to just sketch it out really easily, and it's really difficult to get it wrong. There's this sense of imperfectness with nature and plants that maybe not the more you get things wrong, but if you have one leaf that looks kind of off, I feel like it actually makes it look a little bit more realistic, even if it's really whimsical and sort of stylized like I'm doing here. I feel like people are probably pretty curious about how I come up with all these sorts of different succulent and plant patterns that I can kind of just quickly sketch out. And like I said, I've sort of looked into sketching different plants, and I have created sort of a simple version of those, and then I basically just have like 10 of them that I'm basically sketching out here, and I just sort of get through them all. And what I end up doing on a piece is I will, you know, have a subject in the middle here. Let's just do a little cat. And then if I'm adding greenery around them, I'll pick one side and do one plant. And then what I'll do is I'll go over here and kind of on the opposite side to create some balance, create a similar looking plant, and then I'll do kind of a different, so a pointy one, since I did a rounded one over here, a pointy one over here, and then I just sort of vary what I'm doing, and it ends up looking fairly realistic, again, even in a stylized version of things. And so what I've done is I've basically come up with a little library in my head, and I just am sort of doodling over and over, and when you add color, it can look just about realistic, or at least close enough that people know what I'm drawing. And then you can vary the size of things. And then I just sort of, as I'm doodling and as I'm sketching on a piece, either in my sketchbook or the piece, I just sort of pick and choose what I haven't drawn yet and go from there. Sometimes I like to add little leaves and bits coming off, and I feel like that creates some interest. And yeah, I like doing vines a lot like this. Sometimes my vines I'll do kind of this pattern. And ultimately, my goal is to balance being able to draw what I know and what I'm comfortable with, so I'm not having to relearn every time, but then slowly but surely adding more shapes and variation in shape to my visual library. What I'm doing is I'm just going off of memory, and I have studied and kind of looked at plants throughout the years I've been drawing and painting, and I've created sort of these types of plants that I like drawing, and I just have them in my memory, and that is my visual library that I can just kind of go back to whenever I want to. As long as I'm keeping up with drawing and remember those, I can just kind of come back and add them to a piece. And I've enjoyed creating this sort of whimsical, simplified doodle style of plants that I do, and adding those to my visual library. I figured what I'd do is I'd draw kind of what I know up here, and then maybe look at some new ones, maybe some of my more recent plants that I've gotten, and come up with some new shapes and add to my visual library down at the bottom here. So I'm just gonna sketch a little bit and come back on to sort of discuss that. I like to think of these sort of bird's eye view kind of down on these succulents as a sort of mandala. And if you're interested in learning more about mandalas, I studied about them quite a bit in my master's program in psychology and art therapy. And it's this idea of creating this basically round design, and you can kind of add in whatever you'd like, but there's something really healing and can be really helpful by drawing things in these circular patterns. And that's actually something I used to do when I was young. I would sort of create some sort of design in the center, maybe not as simple as this, something fairly detailed in the center, and then I would add more designs around the outside, and I found that really soothing and relaxing to do. And there wasn't any real wrong way of doing it. I just added shapes and added shapes and added more and more. And I didn't even realize I was creating mandalas. And if you're interested, you should read up about it because they're really fascinating, and you can learn a lot about yourself in what you create. So I figured I would get out a recent piece where I did quite a lot of different plants and kind of go through and remind myself of some of the things I do. So here you can see I do sort of a prickly cactus. It has kind of different arms coming off. Dots for where the little pricklies are. And then I have a different variation of this one actually. It's a little bit more compact and they get kind of bigger. Here they have kind of segments, and then here are the little pokey bits. This is another recent piece that is on my channel a few weeks back, I think. I think I just about got, well, I guess I have a variation of this one. It also ends up having a lot of similar shapes, and so the piece can look really cohesive because you're using the same shapes and probably colors that all speak to each other and can help build a really strong composition. So again, I have my visual library, but I also like to go back and see what I've drawn and kind of remind myself of different things I typically draw. So let's move down here and do some studies of some of my more recent plant pals here in my studio. So this little guy is fairly new to me, and I liked the shape of these leaves were kind of interesting to me and different than what I normally draw. And there's a little bit of sort of a ruffly texture on the edge. So I'm just gonna sketch some of these out, both probably the leaves by themselves, and then maybe try to draw one of these individual plants. So I'm kind of testing out different shapes and really making it kind of my own. And I'm just sort of training myself to come up with a really easy to draw doodle, I guess, of these leaves so I can quickly redraw them in the future and sort of incorporate them into my visual library. There we go. I think I like this one most. These ones are fun, but I think this kind of gets the idea down. The actual leaves are kind of round at the edge. I know I've been speeding this up, but you can probably tell that this is taking me a lot longer to learn, and that's, I mean, I'm learning it, right? But if I take the time now to learn how to draw this particular plant, then I can do them a lot quicker in the future. So that's sort of more or less what these guys look like, depending on the angle you're at. I think I'm gonna draw these a little bit more and then try to do a different one. Let's get a different little guy. I probably have to zoom out a little bit, but let's start with this little one. He's kind of a viney guy. Kind of looks like a little rose here, and then he has quite a few bits. I've drawn this one a little bit, but I haven't incorporated it in a lot of pieces as much. He actually has kind of a thicker stalk. They seem to kind of go in sets. So that's part of the pattern I've picked up on, is they seem to kind of, you can see here, they're all kind of together here, but then as you move down, there's sets of kind of two leaves. It's probably technically one, but going down there. So if I were to simplify this, I would probably do, again, it looks like they're in sets of twos. So I'd probably do one like this. Like that, overlapping, and even more simplified. And then any of these that look like they're kind of sideways more, I'd add a little bit of a line to indicate this is the edge. Let's do one more here, and then we'll call it a day. I'll probably color these later. So this is another newer little guy. And I've drawn stuff like this before, but I think, again, it's a little bit of a different variation. And I'm probably going to draw them kind of straight down, kind of like some of these up here. I don't think all these leaves really look like what I'm going for, but again, when I finish it, it will still look halfway decent, and that's one of my favorite things about drawing nature. I'm obviously adding a lot more what this would look like when he's bigger. He's a little guy. And I kind of just add it until I feel like stopping or I'm hitting another plant. It's a lot of overlapping. Figuring out what is closest to you, making sure to draw that first. And as they kind of go around, they're going to be different shapes. So like here, what I'm seeing is more of just an oval that has a little bit of differentiation on the different sides. But then here, this one is more elongated. And so that's what I was doing here. I think that's good for today. And here we are, kind of a page of plants. And I'm hoping to just add more and more to my visual library as I keep going. I may record painting these. Some of them are only going to look as close to the plant as possible when they are colored. I know that I do these sort of leaves that have variation in color, and so you don't see that as much here. And hopefully you learned a little bit about how I draw plants, why I draw plants, and how I sort of build my visual library of these plant doodles for my illustrations. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more videos kind of like this, make sure to leave me a like to let me know, and comment down below if you are interested in seeing how I draw other things, or if you have suggestions for what else I can fill in my sketchbook. If you enjoy videos like this and other fun art challenges and art discussions, please make sure to join the community and subscribe. I'd love to have you along this art journey and to hear about your art journey as well. And as always, I hope you have a creatively fulfilled day, and I will see you next time. Bye, guys.